As a capitalist and as an entrepreneur, DEI never made sense to me. When I think of DEI, I think of just hiring certain ethnicities to fill the job position.
Here's the question. If there's a talent pool of a bunch of very highly specialized people, and you have two people, they both have the exact same qualifications, but one of them grew up in a worse family, like they had a worse family life, do you think it's okay to hire the person who had a worse off life? That's a form of DEI.
Oh, is it? If they came from not as rich of a background, basically?
Yeah, like it's not even just diversity in race or more women in the workplace. It's a diversity in lived experiences. So you want people from all different types of backgrounds, even if it's a white dude who had a less privileged life growing up, and then a white dude who was super rich growing up. DEI would still be picking the white dude who was less privileged.
Getting rid of DEI initiatives from a corporate perspective is really not smart because DEI was actually created to protect companies. And I know a lot of people think that this is what DEI is, that companies are basically hiring people just to check off boxes of marginalized communities and say that they have a diverse staff. But that's not how DEI works. And I know because I worked in HR for close to 10 years where my sole responsibility was hiring people, and DEI was actually one of the metrics that I was measured on my performance on a year-to-year basis. And over the course of my career, I hired thousands of people, so that's where my knowledge comes from. So in my last video, I talked about how it's illegal to hire someone just because they belong to a marginalized community. So when you hire someone, you're only supposed to base it off of two things. The first being their qualifications, so their past job experiences or their schooling in relation to the job description. And two is supposed to be your assessment of that specific person and how successful you think that they're going to be in this position. Now, the second criteria includes things like, does the candidate have the right personality that's going to make them successful in the role? For instance, if you're trying to fill a sales position, ideally someone who's an extrovert is going to be more successful in that role than someone who's an introvert. And it also includes other criteria that are relevant to the job. Like for instance, with that sales position example, if you're trying to fill a position that's going to be working in a territory that has a lot of Spanish-speaking businesses, then you might be helpful to have someone who speaks Spanish because they're going to be able to communicate with the customer base a lot easier. But it also includes things like the culture fit and how they're going to fit into the culture of the company and how they're going to gel with the rest of the team. And as you can see, it's a little bit of a gray area where a lot of potential discrimination can take place. And when a company commits to DEI, they're essentially just committing to the fact that during that second criteria part of assessing candidates, that they're not going to be discriminatory. Let me give you some real life examples of how DEI works. For instance, I sat in on this panel interview where it was me, another HR representative, like the actual representative that you go to when you have problems at work, and the hiring manager, so the person that the person will actually be reporting into when they get hired. And after interviewing a bunch of candidates, I started to notice that the HR representative was asking every single candidate what they did on Sundays, and then I noticed that they were writing down notes on their resumes. So after like the 7th interview, I asked the HR representative, hey, are you just asking them what they're doing on Sundays for conversational purposes, or is there an actual motive behind it? And the HR representative responded to me by stating that they were asking candidates what they were doing on Sunday because they didn't want anyone who was religious. And when I asked them what their reasoning was, they stated that they didn't want anyone who was religious because then that meant that they had prior commitments and they wanted people who were going to be gung-ho for our company. And I had to tell this HR rep that they couldn't do that because one, not only was it discriminatory and they were opening up the company to discrimination lawsuits, not to mention I told them that their whole psychological assessment for which they were not qualified for could be wrong in the first place because having someone who's very religious could be a sign that they are good at and have a pattern of behavior of committing to something and showing up for it regularly. And if one of the candidates found out that we were asking candidates that question as a qualifier, we would have opened up the company to so many class action lawsuits. And part of the reason why DEI was one of my metrics for my performance every year was because I had to educate myself every year on the changing laws of discrimination and diversity so that I could protect the company from making sure that we weren't practicing discriminatory hiring practices and open ourselves up for lawsuits. And I've had to have similar conversations with hiring managers and other people within the organization about veterans, women, and many other groups. Yes, DEI occurs outside of hiring as well. For instance, DEI initiatives is the reason why women got breastfeeding rooms inside of the offices offices and everyone got phone rooms so that people felt comfortable knowing that they can take personal time and personal calls at work without fearing retaliation. But from a hiring perspective, DEI is put into place to help protect companies from discrimination lawsuits. And yes, HR is there to help employees, help them grow, and help them with any issues that they have while working. And while companies will tell you that HR is there as a resource for employees, HR professionals know that one of the biggest responsibilities of all HR professionals is to protect the company that they work for from employment law and compliance issues. And the reason why you go to HR representatives when you have an issue first is because their job is to try to talk you down from suing the company. And that includes during hiring. And when a company says that they have DEI initiatives, it's a lot harder for someone who claims racial discrimination to state that they are being racially discriminated, because the company can easily come and say, but look, we committed to DEI and look at all these DEI things that we're doing. Which is why it is absolutely unintelligent for a company to drop and get rid of their DEI initiatives, because it leaves them vulnerable to discrimination lawsuits. So yes, DEI, just like the HR department, has benefits for the employee, but they're actually there to help protect the company.
What's a DEI job?
They think the DEI means black. Like, they have put in their minds that it means that there's two people who are applying for a job. This person's going to get it because they're black. When in actuality, DEI is inclusive of everyone. I worked for one of the highest profiting companies in the world, and their DEI initiatives made it so that veterans had support groups. They made it so that new mothers were able to breastfeed in mothering rooms throughout the day, or people who of different religions were able to have meditation rooms where they could have prayer. So it's like making an inclusive workplace for everyone, prioritizing the fact that not everybody's the same. And they think that it means black. And it's like a moving of the goalpost. In their mind, there is no world where a black person would be more qualified, that there's always going to be an infinitely more qualified white person. Doesn't matter if the black person went to school for years. They got it because they're black and not because they worked for it, which is wild. Which is wild when you think about it. Like, you're essentially saying there's no way that I'm not the best. Even if I didn't work for it or I didn't go to school, there's no way that I'm not the best.
So DEI doesn't stand for black?
It doesn't, but they think
that's not what the
it
acronym
means.
is.
They think that that's actually what it means. Like, if you asked someone, they would
unpack this comment while I unpack these groceries. First of all, people don't get hired because of DEI specifically. They get hired because of their qualification. If you don't want people to be included, if you don't want diversity, just say that. Just say that out loud. Say it tomorrow, say it at work, say it to your boss. And if you think including somebody is hiring them solely because of what they look like, you're farly mistaken. Diversity basically just means not straight white men only. It means everybody. It means pregnant women, it means Hispanic people, it means Asian people, it means men, women, creed, race, religion, all the things. It doesn't mean, oh, there's one spot here, it needs to be a person of this color so we can have the full rainbow of human beings. It just means everybody gets a shake. You later went on to say that unqualified people aren't being fired specifically because of DEI. Make that make sense to me. And are you saying this only happens to people of color? Are you saying that they're not firing white people when they're not doing the job, when they're unqualified? If so, how are these unqualified white people getting hired by your metric? It feels like you just pick up the goalpost every single time somebody says something that makes your argument a little invalid, and it's okay to be wrong. I think that's the most important takeaway here, is to be like, oh, I was wrong. I'm wrong every day. I'm wrong all the time. Not because of black people or Asian people or women or people who don't look like me. I'm wrong because I am wrong. And yes, I love LaCroix.